Hi, I'm attorney John Mangan, a board-certified lawyer in the area of wills, trusts, and estates. And I'm here today to talk with you about situations where we have clients that maybe live in another state and are thinking about moving to Florida, or just left another state and have come to Florida. These folks like this are often referred to, for better or worse, as snowbirds. They often come to Florida during the winter months. Sometimes that ends up extending on to greater lengths of time throughout the year. But the first thing that we ask sometimes about when we think about snowbirds is, well, why do people choose Florida? And some of this is pretty obvious, right? I mean, the weather, especially during the winter, hard to beat Florida for the weather. But there are also some other attractive factors that in many cases prompt people to decide to move to Florida. So one is we have no state income tax here in Florida. Another is that there is no state version of the estate tax or an inheritance tax here in Florida. Although, of course, we do have a federal estate tax. Another factor that sometimes prompts people to move to Florida is we have some very favorable asset protection laws. So under Florida law, a number of assets are considered exempt by statute, meaning that if you're sued, if there's some sort of a claim against you, there's a high likelihood that these assets may receive protection. Some examples of this would be Florida homestead property that you own jointly with a spouse in what we call a tenancy by the entireties, IRAs and inherited IRAs, cash value life insurance, and also annuities. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different possible scenarios when we think about snowbirds. One could be you live in another state, not Florida right now, and you don't have a date in mind necessarily where you're going to be making the move. So number one, make sure that you get with an estate planning lawyer in your home state to get a good solid estate plan in place. If you have another residence in Florida, even if it's not your primary residence, then it would also make sense to receive some counsel from a Florida lawyer to see if there's anything that should be done with respect to your property here in Florida. Maybe it should go into an LLC or a corporation. You certainly want to talk through how to title that property. It also may make sense to have what we often refer to as ancillary documents here in the state of Florida. These would be things like a durable power of attorney and some healthcare directives. You should absolutely have those in your home state, but if you're frequently coming to Florida and maybe spending several months out of the year here in Florida, it might make sense to also have those documents written by a Florida lawyer so that they'll be compliant with Florida law. And then in the event that those documents are ever needed, if an emergency happens to occur while you're in Florida, you at least will have some documents that will work very well here in our state. A second scenario may be that you are now domiciled here in the state of Florida. This is your primary residence, but you still may maintain an additional residence or two in other states. You may have some business interests in other states. So in that scenario, you absolutely should have a Florida estate plan drafted by a Florida lawyer. In addition, it may make sense for you to consult with a lawyer in whatever other states you have those connections to in the form of real property ownership or business ownership to make sure that any state-specific documents that are going to work best in your situation are in place. The third scenario that we often see is a client who is just about ready to move to Florida. This is not some distant vision that maybe they're going to come to Florida someday. They've already made a decision. They probably know the date, and we're actually coming up on it. It's pretty close, and it's about ready to happen. So if you're in that situation, you absolutely are going to want to make sure that you update your estate plan to Florida law. And I would encourage you to reach out to a Florida lawyer and begin to build that relationship. One of the things that a Florida lawyer can help you with is to clearly demonstrate that your domicile, which is really your primary residence, once you've moved to Florida, that Florida is your state of domicile, not the state that you left. There are a number of actions that you can take to demonstrate that Florida is now your domicile. And the more of those that you can take, the better in the event that you're ever audited. And when we think about audit under this scenario, we're thinking about your former state or the state that you're about to leave. If they have a state income tax, the last thing that you want them to do in the future is come back and say, you know what, we still really consider you to be a resident of our state, not of Florida. No, we absolutely don't want that. So we want to help you take as many of these actions as you can to line everything up in your favor as much as possible, to demonstrate to anybody that might be looking at this in the future that, hey, I have made Florida my domicile. The other thing that a Florida lawyer can help you with, and this kind of goes to the point that I just mentioned, it's one of the actions that you can take, and that's to help you with establishing Florida homestead. So here in Florida, you can have only one homestead. That's your primary residence. But there are some hoops you have to jump through to receive homestead treatment. But by doing so, there are a number of benefits. We talked earlier about asset protection benefits. Another one that comes with Florida homestead is a break on your Florida property taxes. And not just in the current tax year, but also going forward, because if it's your homestead, then we're able to get a cap on future increases so that you don't see a wild increase year over year on the order of 25, 50% or something like that. No, if you properly declare your homestead, then future increases are going to be minimized, and typically they can't go over 3%. So if you are someone who either lives in another state and is thinking about coming to Florida, or maybe you've recently come to Florida from another state, I hope I've been able to give you some things to think about. There really are some specific issues if you're in one of these situations that need to be properly addressed to put you and your loved ones in the best position possible. If we can be of any help, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to hearing from you.